Welcome to Heartstring Chronicles, where we share extraordinary stories of fate, compassion, and life-changing moments. If you believe that sometimes the universe connects people in the most unexpected ways, hit that subscribe button and join our community of hope seekers. Today's story will show you how one desperate text message sent to the wrong number changed not just one life, but many. Jessica Morales trudged up the narrow staircase of her apartment building in the South Bronx, each step heavier than the last. The flickering hallway lights cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion etched into her features. At 23, Jessica's shoulders already carried the weight of responsibilities far beyond her years. Her faded blue uniform from the diner where she worked double shifts still smelled of grease and coffee, a constant reminder of the 12 hours she'd spent on her feet. As she reached the door of her one-bedroom apartment, Jessica paused to catch her breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she fumbled with her keys, the metal cool against her calloused fingers. From inside, she could hear the soft, rhythmic humming of her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had agreed to watch baby Sophia while Jessica worked her extra shift. The thought of her 6-month-old daughter brought a momentary smile to her face, but it quickly faded as she remembered the reason for her overtime. The final notice from the hospital sat crumpled in her pocket. $3,200 for Sophia's emergency visit last month when her fever had spiked dangerously high. Her health insurance had lapsed when her hours were cut at her primary job, and now the debt collectors called daily. Tonight, her manager had informed her that the diner was cutting back staff. She would lose her evening shifts starting next week. "We're almost there, Sophia," Jessica whispered to herself as she pushed open the door. The apartment was small but meticulously clean. Jessica had painted the walls a soft yellow herself, trying to create warmth in the otherwise dreary space. A second-hand crib stood in the corner of the living room, adorned with colorful streamers Jessica had crafted from magazine pages. Mrs. Rodriguez, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes, looked up from the rocking chair where she cradled Sophia. "She just fell asleep, querida," she whispered. "She was waiting for her mama." Jessica smiled gratefully and gently took Sophia in her arms, inhaling the sweet scent of her baby's hair. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I don't know what I'd do without you." The older woman waved away her thanks. "We take care of each other, yes? But Jessica, you look tired, too tired. You cannot keep working like this." Jessica nodded, knowing her neighbor was right. After Mrs. Rodriguez left, she placed Sophia carefully in her crib and sank onto her threadbare couch. Her gaze drifted to the small side table where a framed photo stood. Jessica at her high school graduation, her parents beaming proudly on either side of her. Both gone now, her father from cancer 3 years ago, and her mother from a heart attack just before Sophia was born. They had left her nothing but memories and the strength they had instilled in her. Opening her worn purse, Jessica pulled out her pay envelope. She counted the bills twice, hoping somehow the math would change. It wouldn't be enough, not for the hospital bill, not for next month's rent, and certainly not for the formula that Sophia desperately needed. Her own supply had diminished due to stress and exhaustion, and the last can on her shelf was nearly empty. Jessica reached for her phone, an old model with a cracked screen. She scrolled through her contacts, wondering who might be able to help. Most of her friends were struggling just as much as she was. Her finger paused on Elena, her childhood, the friend who had moved to Boston for college and now worked as a nurse. Elena had always said, "Jess, if you ever need anything, just text me, doesn't matter what time." Jessica hadn't spoken to Elena in months, pride keeping her from reaching out when things got tough. But tonight, for Sophia's sake, she would swallow that pride. With trembling fingers, she typed a message. "Elena, I'm so sorry to reach out like this. I'm in a really tight spot. Sophia needs formula, and I can't afford it after paying rent. The hospital bills are piling up from when she was sick. If you could help even a little, I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can. I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn. Jessica read the message 3 times, each word painful to write. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering her courage, and hit send. Only in her exhaustion, she failed to notice that her thumb had tapped 1 digit wrong in Elena's new number. Across Manhattan, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alexander Reid was reviewing acquisition proposals on his tablet when his phone vibrated with a message notification. At 36, Alexander had built Reid Innovations from a dorm room startup to a tech empire valued at billions. His algorithms had revolutionized medical diagnostics, earning him a fortune and a reputation as a brilliant but reclusive innovator. Alexander rarely received personal messages. His inner circle was intentionally small, and few people had a private number. He glanced at his phone with mild curiosity, expecting a message from his executive team about tomorrow's board meeting. Instead, a desperate plea from an unknown number filled his screen. Someone named Jessica asking for help with baby formula and hospital bills. Alexander frowned, his first thought that this was some elaborate new scam. But something about the message's raw honesty gave him pause. The details were too specific, the tone too genuine to be a mass-sent fraud attempt. He set down his tablet and picked up his phone, reading the message again more carefully. In the vast stillness of his penthouse, surrounded by expensive minimalist furniture and smart technology that catered to his every need, Alexander found himself drawn to this accidental connection to someone else's struggle. A struggle he had once known intimately himself. Few people knew that Alexander Reid had grown up in a shelter in Queens, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs until her health failed. Fewer still knew that at age 12, he had watched his mother choose between paying rent and buying her heart medication, a choice that ultimately cost her her life. Alexander stared at the message, memories of his own childhood poverty surfacing. Like ghosts, his finger hovered over the option to block the number, the rational response to an obvious misdial. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Not tonight. Not this message. Alexander sat motionless in his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars against the darkness. The message from the unknown number, from this Jessica, still illuminated his screen. He read it a 3rd time, then a 4th, feeling an unexpected tightness in his chest. "This isn't your problem, Reid," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his dark hair. He had built his life on calculated decisions, on emotional distance. His wealth insulated him from the kind of desperation that radiated from this message. He set the phone down on his glass coffee table and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. 40 stories below, tiny figures hurried through the night, each carrying their own struggles invisible from this height. Alexander's reflection stared back at him. Expensive charcoal sweater, meticulously trimmed beard, the composed expression he had perfected for board meetings and press conferences. But behind that reflection, memories stirred. The sharp knot of hunger in his stomach as a child. The sound of his mother's cough growing worse as she skipped her medication to pay for his school supplies. The humiliation of waiting in line at food banks. "It's not my responsibility," he said again, more firmly this time. He returned to his tablet, attempting to focus on the acquisition numbers, but the message had broken his concentration. He found himself picking up his phone again, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. He should simply inform this Jessica that she had the wrong number and move on. That would be the sensible response. Instead, he opened his banking app. $5,000, a trivial sum to him now, less than what he spent on a business dinner, but potentially life-changing to someone struggling to buy baby formula. He hesitated only briefly before authorizing the transfer to the phone number, adding a simple message. "For your baby. This isn't Elena." He set the phone down again, surprised by the sense of satisfaction that washed over him. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but for the first time in weeks, he had acted on pure instinct rather than calculated strategy. Alexander returned to his work, expecting to forget about the message by morning. But something had shifted within him. A door cracked open to a part of himself he'd long kept sealed, the part that remembered what it was like to need help and have nowhere to turn. Across the city, Jessica sat on the edge of her bed, waiting, anxiously for Elena's response. Sophia had woken briefly, fussing with hunger, and Jessica had given her the last of the formula, measuring it carefully to stretch it as far as possible. Now the empty can sat on her nightstand, a reminder of her desperation. Her phone pinged, and Jessica lunged for it, heart pounding. The notification showed a payment received, and her eyes widened at the amount. $5,000, far more than she had ever dreamed of asking for. The accompanying message was brief. "For your baby, this isn't Elena." Jessica stared at the screen in disbelief, her hands beginning to tremble. This wasn't Elena. She had texted the wrong number, and whoever had received her desperate plea had responded with extraordinary generosity. "This can't be real," she whispered, checking the notification again. But the money was there in her account, enough for formula, enough for the hospital bills, enough to breathe for the first time in months. Tears welled in her eyes as relief flooded through her. She looked over at Sophia, sleeping peacefully now, unaware of how their circumstances had just changed. Jessica's first instinct was to text back immediately, but what could she possibly say to express her gratitude? And who was this person? Who could casually send thousands of dollars to a stranger? With shaking fingers, she typed, "I don't know who you are, but you just saved us tonight. I texted the wrong number. I'm so sorry for bothering you, but thank you from the bottom of my heart. I promise I'll pay you back someday." She hesitated before adding a photo, Sophia in her crib, peaceful in sleep, her tiny hand curled around the edge of her blanket. Jessica wanted this stranger to see who they had helped, to know that their kindness had mattered. In his penthouse, Alexander was surprised when his phone pinged again. He had expected either no response or perhaps a scam follow-up asking for more. Instead, he found himself looking at a genuine thank you message and a photo of a sleeping baby, small and vulnerable, in a lovingly arranged but clearly worn crib. The sight of the child struck Alexander unexpectedly hard. There was something about the carefully crafted mobile hanging above the crib, made from what looked like colorful paper and string, that spoke of love transcending limited resources. He recognized the creativity born of necessity, the determination to create beauty even in scarcity. For a moment, he considered not responding. The transaction was complete. There was no need to establish any further connection, yet something about the sincerity of Jessica's gratitude and the photo of her child made him pause. "No need to pay me back," he typed after careful consideration. "Just take care of your daughter." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything else, let me know." As soon as he sent it, Alexander questioned his decision. He had just opened a door to further communication with a complete stranger. It was out of character, potentially problematic, and definitely unplanned. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The following morning, Jessica woke early, still, half convinced that the events of the previous night had been a dream. She checked her phone immediately, and her heart leaped when she saw the money was still there, and that her mysterious benefactor had responded to her thanks. "If you need anything else, let me know." The words both comforted and confused her. Who was this person? Why would they care about her and Sophia, and how could they afford to be so generous? As dawn broke over the Bronx, Jessica carefully dressed Sophia in her warmest clothes. The early spring morning was chilly, but the sky was clear and bright with promise. For the first time in months, Jessica felt something like hope unfurling. In her chest, "We're going shopping, baby girl," she whispered, kissing Sophia's forehead. "And then we're going to find a way to thank the person who helped us." She had no idea how their lives had just changed, or that across the city, a billionaire who had sealed off his heart years ago was thinking about her daughter's tiny hand curled around a blanket, remembering what it meant to truly make a difference. The neighborhood supermarket buzzed with morning activity as Jessica pushed her cart down the baby aisle, Sophia secured in the seat, babbling happily. Jessica's heart felt lighter than it had in months, as she carefully selected 3 large cans of formula, no longer having to choose the smallest size to stretch her dollars. She added diapers, baby wipes, and even a small stuffed elephant that made Sophia's eyes light up when she squeezed it. "Is this too much, baby girl?" Jessica whispered, second-guessing herself as she calculated the growing total in her head. Old habits of extreme frugality were hard to break, but looking at Sophia's bright eyes and rosy cheeks, she pushed the doubt aside. Her daughter deserved this small comfort, and the mysterious stranger had been clear. The money was for them. The pharmacy counter. Jessica handed over the hospital bill she'd been carrying in her purse for weeks. The pharmacist raised her eyebrows slightly when Jessica said she wanted to pay it in full, but proceeded with the transaction. As the receipt printed, confirming the debt was cleared, Jessica felt a knot in her chest loosen. One less cloud hanging over them. "Would you like to set up a prescription savings program while you're here?" the pharmacist asked. "It might help with future expenses." Jessica nodded gratefully. For the first time, she could think beyond just surviving the current day. She could plan, prepare, maybe even prevent the next crisis before it happened. Back at their apartment, Jessica arranged the formula cans on the kitchen shelf, a small pyramid of security. She placed the stuffed elephant in Sophia's crib and sat down at her small kitchen table with her phone. The mysterious benefactor's message still displayed on her screen. "If you need anything else, let me know." Jessica stared at those words, turning them over in her mind. She wasn't the type to take advantage of someone's generosity, but she couldn't stop thinking about ways to improve their situation more permanently. The money would help them survive for now, but what about next month? What about Sophia's future? After careful consideration, she typed a response. "I went shopping today for formula and paid off the hospital bill. I can't tell you what a relief it is. I've been working double shifts at a diner to make ends meet, but they're cutting my hours next week. I've been trying to find a better job with childcare benefits, but it's been impossible with Sophia being so young. I know you've already done more than enough, but do you know of any job opportunities that might work for a single mum? I graduated high school with honors and have some community college credits in business administration before I had to drop out. I'm willing to learn anything." Jessica read the message several times, debating whether it was too forward. But something about this stranger's kindness gave her courage. Before she could second-guess herself further, she hit send. In his downtown office, Alexander was in the middle of a meeting when his phone vibrated with Jessica's message. He glanced at it briefly, then returned to the discussion about quarterly projections and market expansions. But as his CFO droned on about risk assessment, Alexander found his thoughts drifting to the young mother and her baby. There was something refreshing about her straightforward gratitude and honesty. In his world of corporate politics and strategic relationships, genuine interactions were rare. Everyone wanted something from him: investments, endorsements, connections. Jessica simply needed help and was transparent about it. When the meeting finally ended, Alexander stayed behind in the conference room, reading her message more carefully. She wasn't just asking for more money, she was asking for opportunity. That resonated with him. His own break had come when a former professor had recommended him for an internship that eventually led to his first investor. Alexander's company, Reid Innovations, primarily hired specialized engineers and data scientists, positions that required advanced degrees and technical experience Jessica likely didn't have. But the company also needed administrative support staff, customer service representatives, and entry-level positions that could be trained from the ground up. He opened his company directory and scrolled to Human Resources, dialing the extension. For the department director, "Miranda, it's Alexander, I need a favor." 20 minutes later, Alexander texted Jessica back, "I might be able to help. My company has an administrative assistant position opening in our customer experience department. Stable hours, benefits including childcare assistance and training provided. If you're interested, send me your resume and I'll forward it to HR. They'll contact you for an interview." He hesitated, then added, "This isn't charity. We need good people, and you seem determined. That's valuable." Jessica was feeding Sophia. When the message arrived, she nearly dropped the bottle in shock. An actual job opportunity with benefits and childcare assistance. It seemed too good to be true. She still didn't know who this person was or why they were helping her, but this was the chance she had been praying for. As soon as Sophia was asleep, Jessica pulled out her laptop, an old model that ran painfully slowly but still worked. She hadn't updated her resume in years, and what experience she had was primarily in food service and retail. But she worked diligently into the night, emphasizing her organizational skills, her work ethic, and her eagerness to learn. Before sending it, she added a personal note. "I realize I don't even know your name or who you are, but you've already changed our lives more than you can imagine. Thank you for this opportunity. Whether I get the position or not, I won't forget your kindness." Alexander received her resume at 1:37 a.m., evidence of how promptly she had worked on it. He skimmed through it, limited formal education but consistent employment history despite obvious challenges. No gaps larger than the period surrounding her daughter's birth. She had also included references from previous employers, all noting her reliability and strong work ethic. He forwarded the resume to Miranda with a brief note. "Let's give her an interview. I have a good feeling about this one." Then he texted Jessica, "My name is Alexander. Your resume has been sent to HR. They'll be in touch soon to schedule an interview. Get some rest, Jessica." As he set his phone down, Alexander realized he had broken his own rule of maintaining professional distance. For years, he had carefully separated his business decisions from personal feelings, viewing compassion as a luxury he couldn't afford in the competitive tech industry. Yet here he was, personally intervening in the hiring process because something about Jessica's situation had touched him. Perhaps it was because her struggle mirrored his own history too closely to ignore. Or perhaps it was simply time to remember that the purpose of success should be to lift others, not just to rise above them. Jessica, meanwhile, had fallen asleep at her kitchen table, her phone still in her hand. Alexander's message arrived, but she didn't see it until she woke with a start at dawn, neck stiff from the awkward position. "Alexander," she whispered, finally having a name for her mysterious benefactor. She wondered what kind of company he ran, what kind of man he was. For the first time in months, Jessica allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival, a stable job, proper childcare for Sophia, maybe even finishing her education someday. As morning sunlight filtered through her kitchen window, Jessica felt something she had almost forgotten: possibility. The neighborhood supermarket buzzed with morning activity as Jessica pushed her cart down the baby aisle, Sophia secured in the seat, babbling happily. Jessica's heart felt lighter than it had in months as she carefully selected 3 large cans of formula, no longer having to choose the smallest size to stretch her dollars. She added diapers, baby wipes, and even a small stuffed elephant that made Sophia's eyes light up when she squeezed it. "Is this too much, baby girl?" Jessica whispered, second-guessing herself as she calculated the growing total in her head. Old habits of extreme frugality were hard to break, but looking at Sophia's bright eyes and rosy cheeks, she pushed the doubt aside. Her daughter deserved this small comfort, and the mysterious stranger had been clear. The money was for them. At the pharmacy counter, Jessica handed over the hospital bill she'd been carrying in her purse for weeks. The pharmacist raised her eyebrows slightly when Jessica said she wanted to pay it in full, but proceeded with the transaction. As the receipt printed, confirming the debt was cleared, Jessica felt a knot in her chest loosen. One less cloud hanging over them. "Would you like to set up a prescription savings program while you're here?" the pharmacist asked. "It might help with future expenses." Jessica nodded gratefully. For the first time, she could think beyond just surviving the current day. She could plan, prepare, maybe even prevent the next crisis before it happened. Back at their apartment, Jessica arranged the formula cans on the kitchen shelf, a small pyramid of security. She placed the stuffed elephant in Sophia's crib and sat down at her small kitchen table with her phone. The mysterious benefactor's message still displayed on her screen. "If you need anything else, let me know." Jessica stared at those words, turning them over in her mind. She wasn't the type to take advantage of someone's generosity, but she couldn't stop thinking about ways to improve their situation more permanently. The money would help them survive for now, but what about next month? What about Sophia's future? After careful consideration, she typed a response. "I went shopping today for formula and paid off the hospital bill. I can't tell you what a relief it is. I've been working double shifts at a diner to make ends meet, but they're cutting my hours next week. I've been trying to find a better job with childcare benefits, but it's been impossible with Sophia being so young. I know you've already done more than enough, but do you know of any job opportunities that might work for a single mom? I graduated high school with honors and have some community college credits in business administration before I had to drop out. I'm willing to learn anything." Jessica read the message several times, debating whether it was too forward. But something about this stranger's kindness gave her courage. Before she could second-guess herself further, she hit send. In his downtown office, Alexander was in the middle of a meeting when his phone vibrated with Jessica's message. He glanced at it briefly, then returned to the discussion about quarterly projections and market expansions. But as his CFO droned on about risk assessment, Alexander found his thoughts drifting to the young mother and her baby. There was something refreshing about her straightforward gratitude and honesty. In his world of corporate politics and strategic relationships, genuine interactions were rare. Everyone wanted something from him: investments, endorsements, connections. Jessica simply needed help and was transparent about it. When the meeting finally ended, Alexander stayed behind in the conference room, reading her message more carefully. She wasn't just asking for more money. She was asking for opportunity. That resonated with him. His own break had come when a former professor had recommended him for an internship that eventually led to his first investor, Alexander's company, Reid Innovations. Primarily hired specialized engineers and data scientists, positions that required advanced degrees and technical experience Jessica likely didn't have. But the company also needed administrative support staff, customer service representatives, and entry-level positions that could be trained from the ground up. He opened his company directory and scrolled to human resources, dialing the extension. "For the department director, Miranda, it's Alexander. I need a favor." 20 minutes later, Alexander texted Jessica back. "I might be able to help. My company has an administrative assistant position opening in our customer experience department. Stable hours, benefits including childcare assistance, and training provided. If you're interested, send me your resume, and I'll forward it to HR. They'll contact you for an interview." He hesitated, then added, "This isn't charity. We need good people, and you seem determined. That's valuable." Jessica was feeding Sophia. When the message arrived, she nearly dropped the bottle in shock. An actual job opportunity with benefits and childcare assistance. It seemed too good to be true. She still didn't know who this person was or why they were helping her, but this was the chance she had been praying for. As soon as Sophia was asleep, Jessica pulled out her laptop, an old model that ran painfully slowly but still worked. She hadn't updated her resume in years, and what experience she had was primarily in food service and retail. But she worked diligently into the night, emphasizing her organizational skills, her work ethic, and her eagerness to learn. Before sending it, she added a personal note. "I realize I don't even know your name or who you are, but you've already changed our lives more than you can imagine. Thank you for this opportunity. Whether I get the position or not, I won't forget your kindness." Alexander received her resume at 1:37 a.m., evidence of how promptly she had worked on it. He skimmed through it, limited formal education, but consistent employment history, despite obvious challenges. No gaps larger than the period surrounding her daughter's birth. She had also included references from previous employers, all noting her reliability and strong work ethic. He forwarded the resume to Miranda with a brief note. "Let's give her an interview. I have a good feeling about this one." Then he texted Jessica. "My name is Alexander. Your resume has been sent to HR. They'll be in touch soon to schedule an interview. Get some rest, Jessica." As he set his phone down, Alexander realized he had broken his own rule of maintaining professional distance. For years, he had carefully separated his business decisions from personal feelings, viewing compassion as a luxury he couldn't afford in the competitive tech industry. Yet here he was, personally intervening in the hiring process because something about Jessica's situation had touched him. Perhaps it was because her struggle mirrored his own history too closely to ignore. Or perhaps it was simply time to remember that the purpose of success should be to lift others, not just to rise above them. Jessica, meanwhile, had fallen asleep at her kitchen table, her phone still in her hand. Alexander's message arrived, but she didn't see it until she woke with a start at dawn, neck stiff from the awkward position. "Alexander," she whispered, finally having a name for her mysterious benefactor. She wondered what kind of company he ran, what kind of man he was. For the first time in months, Jessica allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival, a stable job, proper childcare for Sophia, maybe even finishing her education someday. As morning sunlight filtered through her kitchen window, Jessica felt something she had almost forgotten: possibility. The Reid Innovations headquarters dominated the corner of Madison Avenue and 47th Street, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that reached toward the clouds. Jessica stood across the street, Sophia strapped to her chest in a baby carrier, both of them staring up at the imposing structure. Her interview was scheduled for 10 a.m., and she had arrived 45 minutes early, anxious about navigating unfamiliar territory with a baby in tow. "That's where Alexander works," she whispered to Sophia, who responded by reaching for Jessica's earring with curious fingers. "Somewhere in that big building is the man who helped us." In the 3 days since their last text exchange, Jessica had researched everything she could about Reid Innovations and its founder, Alexander Reid. What she discovered had left her breathless. Her mysterious benefactor wasn't just well off. He was a billionaire tech mogul whose facial recognition software and medical diagnostic algorithms had revolutionized healthcare. The articles described him as brilliant but reclusive, a visionary with little patience for small talk, and notoriously private about his personal life. Jessica had stared at his photo on the company website for a long time. The sharp jawline, intense grey eyes, and the subtle hint of weariness behind his professional smile. This was the man who had sent her $5,000 without hesitation. This was Alexander. Now, standing before his corporate empire, Jessica felt a wave of inadequacy wash over her. What had she been thinking? She didn't belong in this world of power suits and executive decisions. Her nicest outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought second-hand and carefully tailored herself, suddenly seemed hopelessly inadequate. "Come on, Sophia," she said, squaring her shoulders. "We can do this. We have to try." The lobby was a cathedral of modern design, soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a massive digital wall displaying cascading code that periodically formed the company logo. Jessica approached the reception desk, where a poised woman with silver-framed glasses greeted her. "Good morning. I'm Jessica Morales. I have an interview with Human Resources at 10. The receptionist typed something into her computer, then smiled warmly. "Yes, Miss Morales, you're actually expected in the executive suite, 18th floor. She glanced at Sophia, who was contentedly chewing on her own fingers. "And who's this little one?" "This is Sophia," Jessica replied, surprised by the friendly reception. "I'm sorry I had to bring her. My regular sitter had an emergency and—" "No need to apologize," the receptionist interrupted, reaching for a visitor badge. "We're quite family-friendly here. Several executives bring their children to the on-site daycare." She handed Jessica the badge. "The elevator will take you directly to 18. Miranda Peters is expecting you." The executive floor was hushed and elegant, with glass-walled offices and meeting rooms arranged around a central open area. A woman in her 50s with a sleek bob and kind eyes approached as soon as Jessica stepped off the elevator. "Jessica? I'm Miranda Peters, head of Human Resources." She extended her hand, then smiled at Sophia. "And this must be the young lady we've heard about. Hello there, sweetheart." Jessica's confusion must have shown on her face, because Miranda added, "Alexander mentioned you might need to bring your daughter. We've set up a play area in my office where she can be comfortable during our talk." True to her word, a corner of Miranda's spacious office had been transformed with a soft playmat, age-appropriate toys, and even a portable crib. Jessica carefully settled Sophia on the mat, where the baby immediately reached for a colorful stacking ring. "This is incredibly thoughtful," Jessica said, emotion catching in her throat. Miranda waved her hand dismissively. "Alexander was quite specific about making accommodations. Now shall we discuss the position?" The interview was unlike any Jessica had experienced before. Miranda asked practical questions about her organizational skills, her ability to learn new systems, and her experience handling customer inquiries. There were no trick questions or judgmental glances at her limited education. Instead, Miranda seemed genuinely interested in understanding Jessica's strengths and growth potential. The role would involve supporting our customer experience team, managing schedules, coordinating communications, and eventually training on our proprietary systems, Miranda explained. "The hours are 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, with comprehensive benefits including health insurance effective immediately." Jessica tried to keep her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. No more night shifts, no more scrambling for coverage when Sophia got sick. "And there's the childcare benefit," Miranda continued, glancing at Sophia, who was now contentedly gumming a soft toy. "We have an on-site facility for employees' children. It's quite exceptional. Low ratios, developmental programming, and flexible hours." "That sounds amazing," Jessica admitted, allowing herself a small smile. "May I ask about the salary?" Miranda named a figure that was nearly double what Jessica made at the diner, even with tips. This time, she couldn't hide her shock. "Is that standard for this position?" she asked carefully. "It's competitive for the role and experience level," Miranda replied smoothly. Alexander believes in paying people what they're worth, not just what we can get away with. At the mention of his name, Jessica gathered her courage. Speaking of Mr. Reid, is he involved in all hiring decisions? Miranda's expression shifted slightly, a hint of curiosity crossing her features. Not typically, no. Alexander focuses on product development and strategic partnerships. He rarely involves himself in departmental staffing. She paused, studying Jessica. Your situation appears to be something of an exception. Before Jessica could respond, a notification chimed on Miranda's tablet. She glanced down, then looked. Up with a smile. Well, this is unexpected. Alexander would like to meet you, if you're comfortable with that. Jessica's breath caught. Meet me? Today? Apparently so. He's between meetings for the next 20 minutes. Miranda gestured to Sophia. Bring her along, of course. The journey to Alexander's office felt surreal. They passed through elegant corridors and finally arrived at a corner suite with sweeping views of the city. Miranda knocked once, then opened the door. Alexander, Jessica Morales is here. The man who rose from behind the massive desk was both familiar from his photos and somehow completely different in person. Taller than she had imagined, with shoulders that carried the subtle tension of someone accustomed to bearing heavy responsibilities. His grey eyes were sharper, more penetrating than any camera had captured. Thank you, Miranda, he said, his voice deep and measured. Please give us a few minutes. As Miranda departed, Jessica stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of every imperfection. In her appearance, the slight wear on her shoes, the simple silver earrings that were her only jewelry, the baby spit up she'd hastily wiped from her shoulder that morning. Alexander stepped around his desk, his gaze moving from Jessica to Sophia, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sophia broke the silence by offering Alexander her half-chewed toy with an enthusiastic gurgle. The gesture seemed to break through something in Alexander's carefully composed demeanor. His lips curved into a genuine smile, not the polished one from company photos, but something warmer, more human. Hello, Jessica, he said, finally meeting her eyes. It's good to meet you in person. Jessica shifted Sophia to her other hip, heart pounding. Thank you for seeing me and for everything else. I still don't understand why you've done all this for us. Alexander gestured to a seating area by the windows, away from the formality of his desk. Why don't we sit down? I think we have a lot to talk about. Jessica settled onto the sleek leather sofa, arranging Sophia on her lap. The baby immediately reached for a crystal paperweight on the coffee table, and Jessica gently redirected her curious hands to a set of plastic keys from her diaper bag. Alexander sat across from them, his posture perfect, yet somehow tense, as if he wasn't accustomed to casual conversations in his own office. Did Miranda explain the position? He asked. Beginning with the comfortable territory of business. Jessica nodded. Yes, it sounds incredible, almost too good to be true, honestly. She hesitated, then added, which makes me wonder why someone like you would go to such lengths for someone like me. Alexander's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering. In his eyes, someone like you... A stranger who texted you by mistake, Jessica clarified. Most people would have blocked my number or ignored me. You sent $5,000, and now you're offering me a job. There has to be a reason. Alexander was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting to the Manhattan skyline, visible through his floor-to-ceiling windows. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight Jessica hadn't heard before. Have you ever been hungry, Jessica? Not just hungry for a meal, but hungry for days on end. The question caught her off guard. Yes, she admitted quietly. After Sophia was born, before I could go back to work, there were times I skipped meals so I could afford her formula. Alexander nodded, unsurprised. I recognized the desperation in your message that night. It wasn't just the words, it was the timing, sending a text that late. When things get that bad, you lose sleep. You reach out at midnight because the worry eats at you. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I grew up in Queens with a single mother. We lived in a shelter for 3 years after she lost her job. I was 12 when she died, heart failure because she couldn't afford her medication. His voice remained steady, but Jessica could sense the tightly controlled emotion behind it. The system placed me in foster care. I was lucky. I had a teacher who recognized my aptitude for mathematics and coding. He mentored me, helped me secure a scholarship. Sophia babbled suddenly, a stream of happy nonsense that broke the tension. Alexander's gaze shifted to her, and something in his expression softened. Your message came through at a particular moment, he continued. Earlier that day, my board had approved a $10 million acquisition of a smaller tech company, a company we're essentially gutting for its patents before closing its offices. 63 people will lose their jobs. It's a sound business decision that will increase our quarterly profits by an estimated 18%. He looked back at Jessica, his grey eyes intent. I built this company to create technologies that help people. Somewhere along the way, I started to lose sight of that. Your message. It reminded me of what matters. Jessica adjusted Sophia on her lap, processing his words. So this is about redemption? No, Alexander replied quickly, a hint of sharpness in his tone. This isn't about assuaging guilt or playing savior. The position is real. The company needs someone in that role. Miranda wouldn't have proceeded if your resume didn't show potential. But you put your thumb on the scale, Jessica pointed out. You made sure I got an interview. I provided an opportunity. You still had to earn it. Jessica studied him, this billionaire who had grown up in poverty, who seemed both powerful and somehow wounded. Why tell me all this? You could have just had HR handle everything. We never would have met face to face. Alexander's lips curved in a slight smile. Perhaps I wanted to meet the woman brave enough to ask a stranger for help when her child was in need. It takes courage to expose vulnerability like that. It wasn't courage, Jessica countered softly. It was desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. Sophia chose that moment to drop her keys, their plastic clatter against the hardwood floor, surprisingly loud in the quiet office. As Jessica bent to retrieve them, Alexander moved faster, kneeling to pick them up. He offered them to Sophia directly, and to Jessica's surprise, the baby took them from him without hesitation, rewarding him with a gummy smile. She's very trusting, Alexander observed, something like wonder in his voice. Too trusting, probably, Jessica replied. She hasn't learned to be cautious yet. Alexander returned to his seat, his movements more relaxed now. The job is yours, if you want it, Jessica. No strings attached. The salary and benefits Miranda discussed are standard for the position. You'd report to the customer experience manager, not to me. Our paths wouldn't typically cross in day-to-day operations. Jessica felt both relief and, unexpectedly, a twinge of disappointment at his last statement. Thank you. I accept. Alexander nodded, satisfied. Good. You can start next Monday. That should give you time to give notice at your current job and make arrangements. He hesitated, then added, The childcare center has an opening for Sophia. I checked personally. Jessica blinked back sudden tears. The thoughtfulness of this gesture, ensuring her daughter would be cared for, affected her more deeply than even the financial help had. Thank you, she said again, the words utterly inadequate for what she felt. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for all this. Succeed, Alexander replied simply. That's repayment enough. He stood, signaling the end of their conversation, and Jessica rose as well, shifting Sophia to her hip. As they walked toward the office door, Alexander paused. One more thing, he said, his tone casual, but his eyes serious. The circumstances of how we connected, your wrong number text, my response, I'd prefer if that remained between us. Office gossip can be problematic. Jessica understood immediately. Of course. As far as anyone knows, I applied through normal channels and was hired based on my qualifications. Alexander seemed relieved by her quick comprehension. Exactly. As they reached the door, he extended his hand formally. Jessica shifted Sophia and shook it, noting the contrast between his manicured appearance and the surprising calluses on his palm, evidence perhaps that Alexander Reid still worked with his hands despite his executive position. "Welcome to Reid Innovations, Jessica," he said, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Thank you, Mr. Reid," she replied, matching his formality, understanding the boundary he was establishing. As Miranda appeared to escort her back to HR for paperwork, Jessica glanced over her shoulder. Alexander had already returned to his desk, his attention focused on his computer screen, the brief connection between them seemingly forgotten. But as the door closed behind her, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just transpired, something beyond a job offer, beyond financial assistance. In the elevator, Sophia reached for Jessica's face, patting her cheek with sticky fingers. "We're going to be okay, baby girl," Jessica whispered, kissing her daughter's palm. Better than okay. What she couldn't possibly know was that Alexander remained motionless at his desk long after she'd gone, staring unseeing at his screen, remembering the weight of a small plastic toy in his hand and the unguarded trust in a baby's smile. Jessica's first week at Reid Innovations passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. Each morning, she and Sophia arrived at 7:45, giving her time to settle her daughter into the company's childcare center before heading to her desk. The center itself exceeded all her expectations. Bright, cheerful rooms staffed by attentive caregivers with a ratio of adults to children that ensured each baby received personal attention. Sophia adapted with surprising ease, greeting her caregivers with excited wiggles by the third day. The customer experience department occupied the 14th floor, a spacious environment of open workstations interspersed with glass-walled meeting rooms. Jessica's desk, positioned near a bank of windows overlooking Madison Avenue, came equipped with dual monitors and the latest technology, tools far superior to anything she'd used before. Her supervisor, Natalie Chen, proved to be patient and thorough, walking Jessica through the company's systems with calm expertise. "Don't worry about mastering everything at once," Natalie assured her during their first meeting. "We expect a learning curve. Just ask questions whenever you need to." Jessica took this advice to heart, filling a notebook with detailed instructions and observations. She stayed 30 minutes late each day, reviewing procedures and practicing with the software until the commands became more natural. Her determination didn't go unnoticed. By Thursday, Natalie had already assigned her responsibility for coordinating the department's weekly client satisfaction reports. "You're catching on faster than most new hires," Natalie commented. "Keep this up, and we'll have you handling client communications directly by the end of the month." The work itself was engaging, a welcome change from the physical demands of the diner. Instead of aching feet and smelling of grease, Jessica returned home mentally stimulated, her mind buzzing with new information and possibilities. The regular hours meant she could establish a proper routine with Sophia, breakfast together each morning, dinner and bath time each evening, with weekends fully free for trips to the park and quiet moments reading picture books. Throughout that first week, Jessica saw no sign of Alexander. According to the office grapevine, he was traveling for meetings with potential investors in San Francisco. Despite his absence, she felt his influence in the small kindnesses that eased her transition, the childcare spot that had coincidentally opened up, the workstation positioned to allow her to occasionally glimpse the childcare center's outdoor play area through distant windows, the company laptop assigned for her use at home. When Friday arrived, Jessica received her first paycheck, direct deposited into her bank account, a sum that brought tears to her eyes when she checked the balance on her phone. That evening, after settling Sophia to sleep, she sat at her small kitchen table and created a budget spreadsheet on her company laptop. For the first time in years, she could allocate funds beyond immediate survival, a modest savings account, a small entertainment, a budget, even a category for future education costs. As she worked, her phone chimed with a text notification. Her heart skipped when she saw Alexander's name on the screen. "How was your first week?" Simple, direct, nothing personal, yet the fact that he'd reached out at all surprised her. Jessica considered her response carefully, not wanting to seem overeager or unprofessional. It was excellent. Everyone has been helpful, and Sophia loves the childcare center. "Thank you for the opportunity." She hesitated, then added, "How was San Francisco?" His response came quickly. "Productive. I'm glad things are going well for you both." Jessica smiled at the brief reply, so characteristic of what she'd observed of him. She set her phone down, assuming the conversation was over, but it chimed again a moment later. "The weekend weather looks good. If you haven't been, the children's garden at the Botanical Gardens is worth visiting. Sophia might enjoy the sensory exhibits." Jessica stared at the message, surprised by the personal recommendation. Was Alexander Reid offering parenting advice? The notion seemed both incongruous and oddly touching. "That sounds perfect," she replied. "We'll try it tomorrow." The next morning dawned clear and mild, ideal for their botanical adventure. Jessica dressed Sophia in a yellow sundress and packed a diaper bag with snacks, extra clothes, and Sophia's favorite toys. They took the subway to the Bronx, Jessica narrating the journey to her wide-eyed daughter, who seemed fascinated by the diverse faces of their fellow passengers. The New York Botanical Gardens sprawled before them in springtime glory, pathways winding through carefully tended displays. The children's garden featured interactive exhibits designed for even the youngest visitors. Textured plants, safe for little hands to touch, shallow pools where toddlers could splash, wind chimes that delighted Sophia with their gentle music. Jessica spread a blanket beneath a flowering cherry tree and settled Sophia on her stomach for tummy time, watching as her daughter pushed up on her arms, determined to see more of this colorful new world. A sense of profound peace washed over Jessica as she observed her baby's joy. Just 2 weeks ago, such a day would have been impossible. The admission fee beyond her budget, the luxury of free time, non-existent. "Look how far we've come, baby girl," she murmured, stroking Sophia's dark curls. As afternoon approached, Jessica packed up their belongings and headed toward the exit. Near the main gate, she paused, noticing a tall figure standing by the ticket kiosk. Even from a distance, his bearing was unmistakable, the straight posture, the tailored casual clothes, the way other visitors unconsciously moved around him as if sensing his importance. Alexander. Jessica froze, uncertain whether to approach him. Was his presence coincidence, or had he deliberately come to check on them? Before she could decide, he turned, and their eyes met across the garden path. After a moment's hesitation, he walked toward them, his stride purposeful but unhurried. "Jessica," he greeted her, his expression neutral but not unwelcoming. His gaze moved to Sophia, who was watching him with bright, curious eyes. "And Sophia, enjoying the gardens?" "Very much," Jessica replied, studying him. In dark jeans and a grey Henley, Alexander looked younger, less intimidating than he had in his corporate attire. "Are you here by chance, or—" A flicker of something, embarrassment perhaps, crossed his features. "I was in the area," he said, the explanation obviously thin. Thought I'd see if you took my suggestion. Jessica raised an eyebrow, not believing him for a second. The Bronx isn't exactly on the way to anywhere from Manhattan. Alexander conceded with a slight nod. Fair point. I wanted to see how you were doing outside the office. Make sure the transition is going smoothly. He paused, seeming to realize how his words might sound. I don't typically monitor my employees' weekend activities, if that's your concern. I didn't think you did, Jessica assured him, shifting Sophia to her other hip. It's nice that you care enough to check on us. An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Sophia dropped her stuffed elephant. Alexander bent to retrieve it before Jessica could react, brushing it off, before handing it back to the baby, who rewarded him with a delighted squeal. She seems happy, he observed, a genuine smile softening his features. She is, Jessica confirmed. We both are. This past week has been like living someone else's life, in the best possible way. Alexander's expression grew more serious. The life you have now is very much your own, Jessica. You earned it. Jessica shook her head gently. I'm grateful for the opportunity, but let's be honest. I wouldn't be here without your help. That text message changed everything. You would have found another way, he insisted. People like you always do. People like me? Survivors, he clarified. Those who refuse to give up, no matter the odds. Jessica considered his words as they began walking together toward the exit, falling into step naturally. Is that how you see yourself? A survivor? Alexander was quiet for several paces. I survived, he finally said. But for many years, that's all I did. Built walls, focused on work, measured success in dollars and acquisitions. It's a narrow existence. The personal admission surprised Jessica. This was the most unguarded she'd seen him, and she sensed a loneliness beneath his carefully constructed facade. And now? She asked softly. Alexander glanced at her, then at Sophia, who had dozed off against Jessica's shoulder. Now I'm re-evaluating certain priorities. They reached the main entrance, and Alexander stopped. Do you need a ride home? My driver is waiting. Jessica hesitated, aware of crossing an invisible line. At work, their relationship was clearly defined, employer and employee, with appropriate professional distance. Outside, the boundaries blurred, but Sophia was sleeping, and the thought of navigating the subway with a tired baby was daunting. That would be great, thank you, she decided. Alexander's car was a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and a driver, who opened the door without comment. Inside, the leather seats were butter soft, and a built-in car seat awaited Sophia, clearly installed in anticipation of their acceptance. Jessica raised an eyebrow at Alexander as she secured her daughter. You were pretty confident we'd say yes, he shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual for a man worth billions. I like to be prepared for multiple scenarios. As the car glided through Saturday traffic, they spoke of neutral topics, the gardens, the unusually pleasant weather, an upcoming company project Jessica had heard about from Natalie. When they reached her apartment building in the Bronx, Alexander's expression remained impassive, though Jessica knew the contrast between his world and hers must be stark. Thank you for the ride, she said as the driver opened her door. And for the suggestion. Today was wonderful. Alexander nodded, his gaze lingering on Sophia's sleeping form. I'm glad, perhaps... He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. Have a good weekend, Jessica. I'll see you at the office. As Jessica carried Sophia up to their apartment, she found herself wondering what Alexander had been about to suggest. The day had revealed a different side of him, still reserved, still careful, but more human than the corporate titan she'd researched online. There was something almost vulnerable in his interest in Sophia, in his awkward attempts at connection. Later that evening, as Jessica prepared for bed, her phone chimed with one final message from Alexander. The Central Park Zoo has a new exhibit. For children under 2, Sophia might enjoy the sensory wall in the rainforest section. Jessica smiled as she typed her response. Are you going to happen to be in the area next weekend too? 3 dots appeared as he typed, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, would that be inappropriate? The question was so direct, so unguarded, that Jessica felt a tug of empathy. For all his wealth and power, Alexander Reid seemed uncertain about the most basic human connection. No, she replied honestly. It wouldn't be inappropriate at all. Spring blossomed into early summer, and with it, a tentative routine emerged. Each Saturday, Alexander would suggest an activity suitable for Sophia, the Central Park Zoo one weekend, a children's music performance the next, a splash park as the weather warmed. Jessica initially worried about the appearance of favoritism, but Alexander was careful to maintain professional distance at the office, where their paths rarely crossed anyway. On weekends, they existed in a different realm, one where the billionaire CEO and the single mother shared simple pleasures through the eyes of a growing baby. By Sophia's 7th month, she had mastered sitting up unassisted and had developed a contagious belly laugh that even Alexander couldn't resist. The changes in him were subtle but unmistakable. A softening around the eyes, increasingly frequent smiles, a gradual relaxation of his rigid posture. Jessica noticed he'd stopped, checking his phone constantly during their outings, instead focusing fully on Sophia's latest accomplishments. She's trying to crawl, Alexander observed one Saturday in June as they sat on a blanket in a quiet corner of Riverside Park. Sophia was on her stomach, rocking determinedly back and forth, frustration evident on her tiny face as her knees and arms failed to coordinate. She's been doing that all week, Jessica confirmed, pride evident in her voice. The daycare teacher says she's developing right on schedule, maybe even a little ahead in some areas. Alexander nodded, his expression thoughtful. You've done an exceptional job with her, especially considering the circumstances. Jessica adjusted her sunglasses, using the motion to hide a flush of pleasure at his praise. I can't take all the credit. She came into this world determined to thrive. She paused, then added softly, and we've had help. Alexander's gaze met hers briefly before returning to Sophia. Small interventions at critical moments. The real work has been yours. Not so small, Jessica countered gently. She had never directly acknowledged the extent of Alexander's ongoing generosity, the driver who mysteriously appeared when weather was poor, the package of educational toys that arrived after she'd mentioned Sophia's growing curiosity, the pediatric specialist he'd arranged when Sophia developed a worrying rash. You've become important to her, to us. Something flickered across Alexander's features. Pleasure, uncertainty, a hint of alarm. After a moment, he reached out and let Sophia grab his index finger, her tiny hand wrapping around it with surprising strength. She has a good grip, he said, deflecting from the emotional territory Jessica had ventured into. Jessica allowed the redirection, having learned that Alexander retreated when conversations turned too personal. Instead, she unpacked the lunch she'd prepared. Simple sandwiches, fruit and homemade cookies. Alexander had initially insisted on ordering elaborate picnic baskets from high-end caterers, but Jessica had firmly established that she preferred contributing what she could. Today's compromise was her preparing the food while he brought an expensive bottle of sparkling water and artisan lemonade. How's the customer service project coming along? Alexander asked as they ate, referencing a new initiative Jessica had mentioned the previous week. Really well, she said, brightening. Natalie's letting me take the lead on the feedback implementation. We're developing a new response protocol that should improve resolution times by at least 30%. Alexander nodded approvingly. Natalie mentioned your contributions in the last department head meeting. She's impressed. Jessica paused, mid-bite. You discuss me in department head meetings? Your project was reviewed, Alexander clarified, his tone carefully neutral. It's significant enough to warrant executive attention. Right, Jessica said, not entirely convinced. She'd noticed other small signs that Alexander was tracking her professional progress, comments from colleagues about his questions, her performance review scheduled directly with the VP of Human Resources rather than following the standard chain of command. It should have felt intrusive, but somehow it didn't. Alexander's interest seemed genuinely focused on her success, not on controlling her. Sophia chose that moment to flop onto her back, a string of babbles erupting as she reached for the clouds overhead. Jessica laughed and leaned over to tickle, her daughter's stomach eliciting a cascade of giggles that drew smiles from passing joggers. She's getting more vocal, Alexander observed. Her language development seems advanced. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Have you been reading baby books? The faintest hint of color touched Alexander's cheeks. I may have done some research, purely out of curiosity. The admission warmed Jessica in unexpected ways. The thought of Alexander Reid, tech genius and corporate titan, studying infant development milestones because of Sophia was both amusing and oddly touching. Well, your research is accurate, she confirmed. The daycare teachers say she's quite the chatterbox. They think she'll be an early talker. Alexander seemed pleased by this information. Cognitive development at this stage is fascinating. The neural connections forming when she experiences new things. It's like watching the most complex computer system in the world build itself. Jessica laughed. Leave it to you to compare a baby to a computer system. An apt analogy, he defended, though his eyes crinkled with humor. Though I've yet to design an algorithm that can predict when she'll decide to put absolutely everything in her mouth. As if on cue, Sophia grabbed a fistful of grass and aimed it toward her face. Jessica quickly intercepted, removing the impromptu salad from her daughter's grasp. Case in point, Alexander said dryly. The afternoon passed in comfortable conversation, punctuated by Sophia's demands for attention. As the sun began its westward descent, Alexander helped Jessica pack up their picnic supplies with an efficiency that spoke of growing familiarity with the routine. I have tickets for the Children's Symphony next Saturday, he said as they walked toward the park exit. They do a program specifically designed for infants, lots of sensory elements, shorter pieces, freedom to move around. The research suggests early exposure to classical music benefits neural development. Jessica bit back a smile at his clinical framing of what was essentially a baby concert. That sounds wonderful. What time? 11. I thought perhaps we could have lunch afterward. There's a restaurant nearby with private dining rooms where Sophia could nap if needed. He spoke casually, but Jessica noticed the slight tension in his shoulders as he awaited her response. These outings had always centered entirely on Sophia, with meals or activities chosen specifically for her benefit. A proper lunch, even with Sophia present, felt like a subtle shift in their dynamic. I'd like that, she said simply. Alexander nodded once, visibly relaxing. At the park entrance, his driver was already waiting, the car seat installed and ready. As Jessica secured Sophia, she reflected on how natural this had all become, sharing weekends with one of the most powerful men in New York, watching him gradually open up through his interactions with her daughter. On the drive back to her apartment, Sophia fell asleep, her head tilted at an angle that would surely lead to complaints upon waking. Jessica gently adjusted her position, then settled back in her seat, suddenly aware of Alexander watching her. You're very good with her, he said quietly. Lots of practice, Jessica replied with a small smile. When it's just the two of you, you figure things out pretty quickly. Alexander's expression grew more serious. You never mentioned Sophia's father. The comment caught Jessica off guard. In all their conversations, Alexander had never asked about her personal history. She considered deflecting, but found herself wanting to be honest with him. There isn't much to say. He was a guy I dated for a few months. When I told him I was pregnant, he made it clear he wasn't interested in being a father. She shrugged. An old hurt long accepted. He sends a check sometimes, not regularly enough to count on, but I put whatever comes into Sophia's college fund. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He's missing everything important. His loss, Jessica. Agreed. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "What about you? You've never mentioned family." Something shuddered in Alexander's expression. "There's no one. My mother died when I was young, as I told you. No siblings. My father was never in the picture." "Foster care, right?" Jessica prompted gently, remembering their conversation in his office. Alexander nodded. 3 different homes between 12 and 18. None particularly memorable. The clinical way he dismissed those formative years spoke volumes about what he wasn't saying. Jessica thought of Sophia, of the love and security she was determined to provide, and felt a deep sadness for the boy Alexander had been. And since then, no serious relationships? The question was personal, perhaps too personal, but the quiet intimacy of the car, with Sophia sleeping peacefully between them, created a space that seemed to allow for greater honesty. Alexander was silent for a long moment. "Relationships require vulnerability," he finally said. "That's not something that came naturally after my childhood. And once the company took off..." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely. "Success creates its own complications. People want proximity, to power more than they want you." The simple truth of his statement struck Jessica deeply. She thought of the man she'd come to know over these past months. Brilliant and driven, yes, but also thoughtful, observant, capable of extraordinary kindness. How lonely it must be to question every connection, to wonder if interest was genuine or merely strategic. "Sophia doesn't care about your net worth," she said softly. "She just likes that you let her drool on your probably very expensive shirts and never complain." That startled a genuine laugh from Alexander. The sound warming, the space between them, a refreshingly honest assessment of my appeal. The car pulled up outside Jessica's apartment building, and Alexander hesitated before speaking again. "Would you consider a different arrangement for next weekend? The symphony is in the morning, but there's a technology exhibition at the Natural History Museum in the afternoon that Sophia might enjoy. The sensory displays are designed for very young children." "That sounds like a full day," Jessica observed. "Too much?" he asked, uncertainty flickering across his features. Jessica studied him, realizing with sudden clarity that these Saturdays had become as important to Alexander as they were to her and Sophia. "Not too much," she assured him. "It sounds perfect." As she carefully extracted the sleeping Sophia from her car seat, Alexander added, "My driver can pick you up at 9, if that works for you." "We'll be ready," Jessica promised. Alexander remained in the car as they drove away, but Jessica caught his gaze lingering on them through the window. Walking up to her apartment, Sophia warm and heavy in her arms, Jessica found herself contemplating the gradual transformation of the guarded billionaire who had answered her accidental text. Weekend by weekend, smile by smile, he was becoming something she had never expected, a friend. The quarterly board meeting at Reid Innovations had run long, stretching past 7 in the evening. Alexander sat at the head of the conference table, outwardly focused on the CFO's presentation about projected earnings, but his thoughts kept drifting to the weekend ahead. He'd secured tickets to a butterfly exhibit designed for infants. Sophia's growing mobility meant she would appreciate the colorful, fluttering creatures, and Jessica had mentioned her daughter's fascination with movement and bright colors. The phone vibrated silently in his pocket. Alexander typically ignored messages during board meetings, but something prompted him to discreetly check the screen. Jessica's name appeared with a text that made his heart stutter. At emergency room, with Sophia, 103 fever, trouble breathing. Please send good thoughts. Alexander stood abruptly, cutting off his CFO mid-sentence. We'll continue this tomorrow. Something urgent has come up. Without further explanation, he strode from the room, already dialing his driver, as bewildered board members exchanged glances. Behind him. Which hospital? He demanded the moment Jessica answered. Alexander. Her voice sounded small, frightened. Bronx, Lebanon. But you don't need to... I'm on my way. He ended the call, instructing his driver to use emergency lights if necessary. The 20-minute journey passed in an eternity of worst-case scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. Alexander had faced market crashes, hostile takeovers, and corporate espionage with cool detachment, but the thought of tiny Sophia struggling to breathe filled him with primal fear. The emergency room was crowded, buzzing with the controlled chaos of urgent medical needs. Alexander scanned the waiting area until he spotted Jessica in a corner chair, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed. Sophia was conspicuously absent. "Where is she?" he asked, reaching Jessica in 4 long strides. Jessica looked up, momentary surprise, at his presence quickly replaced by relief. "They took her back about 20 minutes ago. Her oxygen was low, and they're worried about pneumonia." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They won't let me go with her yet because they're doing tests." Alexander sat beside her, instinctively taking her hand. "What happened?" She seemed fine this morning, just a little fussy. By afternoon she was burning up, and then she started making this terrible wheezing sound. Jessica's composure crumbled, tears spilling down her cheeks. It happened so fast. Without thinking, Alexander pulled her into an embrace, her tears dampening his shirt collar. "She's getting help now," he murmured, his own heart hammering with concern. "That's what matters." A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Miss Morales, we need some insurance information and medical history." Jessica straightened, wiping her eyes. "Of course." She reached for her purse, hands shaking slightly as she extracted her insurance card. The one provided through Reid Innovations. Alexander noted with a flicker of gratitude that at least that worry had been eliminated. "I'll also need payment information for the deductible," the nurse continued. "It's $200 for emergency services." Jessica's face fell. Even with good insurance, such an amount would strain her carefully managed budget. Before she could respond, Alexander interjected smoothly, "Put it on this." He handed the nurse his black card. "And ensure Sophia Morales receives whatever care she needs, regardless of coverage limitations." The nurse's eyes widened slightly. At the card, then at Alexander himself, recognition dawning. "Yes, sir, Mr. Reid. I'll update the attending physician that you're here." After the nurse departed, Jessica turned to Alexander. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied simply. Then, seeing her distress hadn't abated, he added, "Consider it an advance on your performance bonus. You've more than earned it." The fiction allowed Jessica to accept his help without feeling like charity, though both knew his motivation had nothing to do with professional compensation. They lapsed into silence, the minutes crawling by with excruciating slowness. Alexander maintained his outward calm, but his mind raced with contingencies. If Sophia needed specialists, he would fly them in. If better facilities existed elsewhere, he would arrange immediate transfer. "Family of Sophia Morales?" a doctor called eventually, approaching with a tablet in hand. "Here," Jessica said, rising. Quickly, Alexander stood beside her, his hand automatically moving to support her lower back. "I'm Dr. Patel. Sophia has pneumonia, but we've caught it early. Her oxygen levels have improved with treatment, and we've started antibiotics." The doctor smiled reassuringly. "She's a fighter. We'd like to keep her overnight for observation, but you can see her now." Jessica sagged with relief, and Alexander steadied her. "Thank you, doctor," he said. "Is there anything else she needs, doctor?" Patel glanced between them, making an assumption about their relationship that neither corrected. "Just rest and monitoring. We've set up a pediatric room where you can stay with her." He led them through double doors into the treatment area. Sophia lay in a clear-sided hospital crib, her small body connected to monitors, an oxygen tube beneath her nose. Despite the frightening apparatus, her eyes brightened when she saw Jessica, tiny arms reaching up immediately. "Oh, baby," Jessica whispered, gathering her daughter close, mindful of the tubes and wires. "Mommy's here now." Alexander hung back, throat tight with emotion at the sight of Sophia's vulnerability. The vibrant, curious baby who had captured his heart looked so small against the white hospital sheets, her normal energy subdued by illness. Jessica looked up, noticing his hesitation. "She wants to see you too," she said softly. Approaching the bed, Alexander extended his hand and Sophia grabbed his finger with surprising strength given her condition. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You gave us quite a scare." "Us." The word hung in the air, significant and unremarked upon. Hours later, Sophia had fallen into a medicated sleep, her breathing easier but still monitored closely. Jessica refused to leave her side, keeping vigilant watch from a chair pulled alongside the crib. Alexander had arranged for a second recliner to be brought in, ordered food delivered for Jessica, and made calls to ensure Sophia received the hospital's most attentive care. "You should go home," Jessica said as midnight approached. "You've done more than enough." Alexander shook his head. "I'll stay." And he did, watching over both of them through the long night, his presence a silent promise that whatever came next, Jessica wouldn't face it alone. Sophia's recovery progressed steadily over the following weeks. The antibiotics worked effectively, and her natural resilience did the rest. But the hospital experience had changed something fundamental between Jessica and Alexander. The careful boundaries they had maintained, weekend outings centered around Sophia, professional distance at work, had blurred during those fraught hours in the pediatric ward. Alexander had stayed for 2 full days, working remotely from Sophia's hospital room, his commanding presence ensuring the little girl received attention from the hospital's top specialists. When they were finally discharged, his driver had taken them home, and Alexander had personally carried a sleeping Sophia up to Jessica's apartment. He'd returned the next day with groceries, a state-of-the-art air purifier, and a pediatric nurse he'd hired to check on Sophia daily during Jessica's work hours. Now, 3 weeks later, a warm July evening found them on the small balcony of Jessica's apartment. Sophia had finally returned to her normal sleep schedule and was tucked safely in her crib inside. Alexander sat in a folding chair beside Jessica, the city lights spread before them, a comfortable silence between them. "She's completely recovered," Jessica said, breaking the quiet. The follow-up X-ray was clear. "We can stop the breathing." "Treatments." Alexander nodded, visible relief crossing his features. "Dr. Chen is one of the best pediatric pulmonologists in the country. I trust his assessment." Jessica smiled softly. "You know, most people would just send flowers when a colleague's child is sick. You sent the former Surgeon General's protégé." "Sophia deserves the best care," he replied simply, as if dispatching world-renowned specialists was perfectly reasonable. "It's not just Sophia, though, is it?" Jessica asked gently, turning to face him. The question had been building in her mind since that night in the hospital when he'd refused to leave. "This isn't just about her anymore." Alexander's expression shifted, a carefully constructed wall momentarily faltering. He looked away, his profile sharp against the twilight sky. I've become attached to both of you." The admission, though delivered with characteristic restraint, represented a significant breach in his emotional defenses. Jessica reached out, covering his hand with hers. "We've become attached to you too," she said. "Sophia lights up whenever you walk into a room. And I—" She hesitated, weighing her next words carefully. "I've never met anyone like you, Alexander." He turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining with deliberate intent. "I'm not good at this," he admitted, his voice lower than usual. "Relationships, vulnerability, my default setting is to maintain distance." "I've noticed," Jessica replied with a small smile. "But you're here anyway." Alexander met her gaze then, his eyes reflecting something raw and honest. "When you texted about Sophia being in the hospital, I felt—" He paused, seemingly searching for adequate words. "I felt terror, not concern, not worry, pure terror, the kind I haven't experienced since I was a child watching my mother struggle to breathe." Jessica's heart ached at the comparison, understanding suddenly the depths of what Sophia's illness had triggered in him. The board meeting, the company, the millions at stake in the decisions being made, none of it mattered, he continued. All that mattered was getting to you both, making sure she was safe, making sure you weren't alone. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "That's when I knew." "Knew what?" Jessica whispered, though she suspected the answer. "That somewhere along the way, you and Sophia became my family." The words emerged with difficulty, as if extracted from some closely guarded vault within him. "The family I never had. The family I never thought I wanted." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes, unexpected emotion closing her throat. For months she had watched Alexander's gradual transformation from the aloof billionaire who had answered her mistaken text to this man who now sat beside her, finally giving voice to feelings that had been evident in his actions long before his words acknowledged them. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted, vulnerability evident in his usually confident demeanor. "This isn't a scenario I ever planned for." Jessica squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe that's okay. Maybe some things aren't meant to be planned." Alexander Reid, master strategist and corporate chess player, appeared momentarily at a loss. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, he leaned forward and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty as Jessica responded. When they parted, Jessica saw something she'd never witnessed before. Alexander smiling without reservation, the carefully maintained control momentarily abandoned. "Definitely not planned," he murmured, "but undeniably right." From inside the apartment, Sophia's babbling voice called out, "Perfect timing as always." Jessica stood, tugging Alexander's hand. "Come on, someone's awake and probably wondering where we are." As they stepped inside together, Jessica couldn't help but marvel at how completely her life had transformed since that desperate night when she'd texted the wrong number. The man who had answered, a stranger with the means to help and, more importantly, the heart to care, had become essential to her world in ways neither of them could have imagined. 1 year later, Jessica stood in the lobby of the newly constructed Morales Family Center, a state-of-the-art facility in the South Bronx dedicated to supporting single parents and their children. Sunlight streamed through the glass atrium, illuminating the colorful play area where several toddlers explored under the watchful eyes of trained caregivers. Among them, Sophia, now 18 months old, confidently stacked blocks with another little girl, her dark curls bouncing as she concentrated on her task. "The daycare is already at 70% capacity," reported Diane, the center's director. "And we have 20 families enrolled in the job training program. The response from the community has been overwhelming." Jessica nodded, pride evident in her expression. "And the housing assistance program?" 15 families placed so far, With another 10 applications being processed this week, Diane consulted her tablet. The legal aid clinic is booked solid for the next month. Turns out offering free childcare during consultations makes a huge difference in appointment attendance. That was Alexander's insight, Jessica acknowledged, smiling as she spotted him across the lobby, engaged in serious conversation with a construction foreman about the center's Phase 2 expansion. The Morales Family Center represented the culmination of a vision Jessica had developed over the past year, inspired by her own journey from desperate single mother to thriving professional. Alexander had provided the initial funding, but the concept, design, and operational model were entirely Jessica's creation. She had resigned from her administrative position 6 months ago to become the center's executive director, a role that utilized her organizational skills, empathy, and first-hand understanding of the challenges facing single-parent families. Alexander concluded his discussion and made his way toward Jessica, his expression softening as it always did when their eyes met. He wore casual clothes today, dark, jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his billionaire status deliberately understated when visiting the center. The playground equipment will be installed next week, he reported, and the rooftop garden plans are finalized. Jessica nodded, making a mental note. Perfect timing for the official opening ceremony. She hesitated, then added more quietly, "Have you decided if you want to speak at the event? The press will expect it from the primary donor." Alexander shook his head. "This is your achievement, not mine. I'll be there, but in the background, where I belong." His insistence on redirecting attention from his financial contribution to Jessica's vision had been a constant theme throughout the center's development. While the business world knew Alexander Reid had funded the project, he had deliberately kept his name off the building, allowing Jessica's to take prominence instead. "The families we're helping don't care about seeing a billionaire cut a ribbon," he'd explained when she questioned his decision. "They care about seeing someone who understands their struggles leading the way forward." Sophia spotted them and toddled over, arms outstretched. Alexander scooped her up with practiced ease, settling her against his hip as she babbled excitedly about her block tower. The gold band on his left hand caught the sunlight, a match to the one Jessica wore, both simple and understated, exchanged in a private ceremony 3 months earlier with only Sophia and 2 witnesses present. Their relationship had evolved, with the same careful intentionality that characterized everything Alexander did, but with a warmth and depth that transformed them both. Jessica had brought joy and spontaneity into his meticulously ordered world. He had given her stability and support without diminishing her independence. "I got another text message this morning," Jessica said as they walked toward the center's cafe area, Sophia still chattering happily in Alexander's arms. "A mother of twins recently laid off, desperate for formula and diapers. She found the center's number online." Alexander's expression grew thoughtful. "What did you tell her?" "To come in immediately. We helped her apply for emergency assistance and enrolled the twins in our daycare program while she interviews for jobs we've connected her with." Jessica's eyes shone with quiet satisfaction. She kept apologizing for needing help, for not being able to manage on her own. "And you told her that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is reach out when we're struggling." Jessica reached up to brush a stray curl from Sophia's forehead. That connecting with the right person at the right moment can change everything. Alexander nodded, understanding the deeper significance of her words. His free arms slipped around Jessica's waist, drawing her closer as they paused to watch the families gathered in the center, parents receiving the support they needed, children thriving in a safe environment, a community forming around shared experiences and mutual aid. "One wrong number," he murmured, thinking back to that night that had altered the trajectory of both their lives. One desperate text. Jessica leaned into his embrace, her heart full as she surveyed what they had built. Together, not just the center, but their unexpected family. "The best mistake I ever made," she replied softly. In her father's arms, Sophia reached out to touch her mother's cheek, connecting them in a circle of touch that symbolized the family they had become. Not through birth or conventional paths, but through compassion, courage, and the transformative power of connection in a moment of need. As Alexander, Jessica, and Sophia walked hand in hand through the doors of the Morales Family Center, their silhouettes framed against the setting sun, they represented a powerful truth. Sometimes our greatest blessings begin with our deepest moments of desperation. Single text sent to the wrong number in the darkest hour of need had sparked a connection that transcended circumstance. A billionaire who had everything except what truly mattered found his heart awakened by a struggling mother who had nothing except unconditional love for her child. Together, they discovered that family isn't always born. Sometimes it's created. Through courage, compassion, and chance, their story reminds us that behind every message, there's a human being. Behind every plea for help, there's potential for transformation. And sometimes, the wrong number turns out to be exactly the right. 1. If this story touched your heart, remember that small acts of kindness can change lives in ways we never imagine. Perhaps there's someone in your world waiting for you to answer their call for help, or perhaps you're the one who needs to reach out. Thank you for sharing this journey with us on Heartstring Chronicles. If you believe in the power of unexpected connections, hit that subscribe button and join our community. New stories of hope, courage, and second chances await you every week.